It is Vlogmas Day 24 and it is time to talk through my top 10 shows that I've seen at the theatre this year. Hi everyone, my name is Chloe, welcome back to my channel, thank you for being here today. Today's video is a Vlogmas video. I'm going to be posting a new video every day in December up to and including Christmas Day. We've been doing a mixture of bookish and theatrical content and today's going to be our last theatre related video of this month. Kind of, there's still a vlog to come up next week where I actually will be going into a theatre, but it's our last like sit down theatre video of this month. I will say if you've watched my video from yesterday, I think it was, you will know that I am planning on doing more sort of sit down theatrical content into the new year. So this is not the end of it altogether, but it is the end of it for this year. So what other way to end it than to talk through my favourite shows that I've seen this year. So I've already gone through everything that I've been to see in 2022 and given you like very quick thoughts and star ratings for those. But what I wanted to do was actually go a little bit more in depth and talk you through my top 10 shows that I saw this year in the same way that I would do my top 10 books that I read this year. Now, if you've watched my top 10 shows of all time, you will know that I found it very, very hard to narrow it down to 10. And yes, the same thing has happened with this. So I'm just going to talk through a couple of standout honourable mentions. The first one being sort of 3 shows in one, really. Basically, in my top 10, I've tried to kind of generally include productions that I haven't seen before, or ones where maybe it's like an entirely new production, so something has changed quite drastically about it since I last saw it. I've tried not to just include things that I've seen many times before, because otherwise, like, Les Mis is going to be very high up on this list. And at this point, I've seen it 24 times. We know that I love it. We don't need to put it on my top 10 list every single year. So Les Mis is an honourable mention. I did see it 2 times this year and I still had a great time seeing it. I saw some particularly good performances this year, but I just didn't want to include it in my top 10. The same goes for Hamilton and Heathers. I had a great time seeing both of those, but as they are not really new to me productions or shows this year, I didn't want to sort of use a space for those when I could include things that are new to me instead. Speaking of things that are new to me, I did want to just do a shout out to The Time Traveller's Wife that I went to go and see in Chester. I really, really enjoyed this show. I feel like for me, I always do prefer a musical when I know the songs a little bit going into it, because it helps me take in the story a bit more. I'm not sort of concentrating so much trying to hear every single word so that I can figure out exactly what the story is. Like, I like to have that base knowledge of it. With this one, I actually found it quite easy to follow along. I don't know if it's partly because I know the story from like having seen the film before, or if it's just that the music itself was quite easy to understand. But I do think it's a show that I will enjoy more on a rewatch, like if I knew the songs more, but I've only seen it once. And also it's a new production that I do feel like needs some work on certain areas if it is going to transfer to a bigger venue. I really, really hope it does, because I felt like it had a lot of promise but didn't quite make my top 10, but I still wanted to mention it because, like I said, a very, very promising production that I will keep my eye on for any sort of further developments with that one. And then the last sort of honourable mention isn't actually a show, but I felt like I should mention it in here because I had a really good time when I went to it, and that was MusicalCon. I went with Becca to MusicalCon. It was at the Excel. It was a convention that was all about musical theatre. There was a mixture of performances on stage. There were talks on sort of different creatives involved with musical theatre. There were shops where you could buy various types of merchandise as well. It was a good time. It did have some teething issues, particularly to with sound, because it felt like the area wasn't quite spread out enough. But it is coming back next year. It is going to be in one of the bigger halls, and hopefully they'll have taken a lot of the feedback on board and it'll be even better next year. But I had a really good time at it, particularly seeing some of the cast reunions. And again, I just felt like I needed to mention it in this, even though it's not in sort of my top 10 experiences of the year, which we are actually going to go on to now. It was very difficult to put these in an order, and particularly when we get to like the top 3, maybe 4, it is subject to change, but this is what I'm going with at the minute. So at number 10, surprise, surprise, we've not actually got a musical, we've got a play. I went to see To Kill a Mockingbird back in July, I think it was, and this is a play based on a book I read for my GCSEs. I really, really liked that book. I've read it since I've studied just to read it, just because I enjoyed the book, and I think that's a good sign. If you can read it to the extent you have to read it when you're studying and then still want to reread it after, it's generally a good sign that you enjoyed the book. And I've been wanting to see this play for a while. I actually bought tickets pre-pandemic, but then obviously the date for it kept getting pushed back. The cast ended up getting changed as well, because it was originally supposed to have Rhys Ifans in it, and then I think he wasn't available, so it ended up having Rafe Spall as Atticus instead. He was phenomenal in this role. It was just a very well done production. It was Aaron Sorkin who did the writing for it. I really like Aaron Sorkin's work as a scriptwriter for film and TV, and yeah, I just felt like it was a very, very good adaptation of a story that I already loved, and I felt like it needed a place on this list. Okay, so the next one is kind of an exception to a rule. So I know I said that I wasn't including things where it wasn't like a whole new production of it, but this one I wanted to include just because the reason why I went to see this show was something like fairly important. So basically my number 9 show of this year is Waitress, which yes, I've seen many times before. I've seen it 11 times at this point. The time I went to see it this time is the last time I'm going to be able to see it for who knows how long, because I honestly have no clue when or even if they're going to do another production of it. It's finished on the West End, the tour is now finished. We don't know if they're going to do anything with this show again. I really hope they do, because I love it so much. But with all the other ones that I'd sort of seen but not included on this list, when I said Les Mis, Hamilton, Heathers, I have opportunities to see those again. I went to see Waitress because I wanted to see it one last time before I knew I wouldn't be able to see it again, and this show means so much to me. It became my comfort show to watch when I was living in London. I always say it's a show that's got a little bit of everything. If I had a bad day and I just wanted to go and cry, I could go and watch it. Wait till She Used to Be Mine started and just start crying. Or if I was feeling really good, there's plenty of happy songs in there as well. So it had a little bit of everything depending on what emotion I needed at the minute. And I was particularly happy that I got to go and see it this last time, because David Hunter as Dr. Pomatter was one of my favourite parts of this show, and he was in the West End production. The West End production then got closed because of COVID. It was supposed to be closing anyway. It was supposed to be closing in July 2020. They decided just to not put it back on after COVID, because obviously it had already gone past that date, and they had something else to put into the theatre instead. It ended up going on tour and they got Lucy Jones to play Jenna, but initially they didn't have David Hunter playing Dr. Pomatter. So I'd sort of not had a chance to see him one last time and kind of say goodbye to that performance. But then him coming back for the end of the tour meant I was able to see that, and that is why this is number 9 on my list, because that was just sort of like a nice way to be like a final time to see Waitress for, like I said, who knows how long. I really hope that they do something else with this production in the future. At number 8 we have a brand new show that's had a couple of limited runs this year, and I've been able to see it at both of those runs, and that is But I'm a Cheerleader. It's been performed at the Turbine Theatre, which is one of those theatres in London that is sort of designed to sort of foster new productions and just give them time to kind of create the show and get word out about it. And I've seen a couple of things at this theatre now, and this show in particular is the one where I've gone, I really hope that you have a life after this run, because it's just such a fun show that deals with some fairly heavy topics, but also just like in this really like tongue-in-cheek way. And again, it's based on something that I really like. It's based on a film from the late 90s, early 2000s. It's got like a cult following at this point, but I remember watching it when it first came out, and when I heard they were doing a musical of it, I was very excited, and it didn't disappoint either of the times that I went to see it. Both the times that I've been to see it, I just left feeling like very happy and uplifted at the end of the show. And like I said, I really hope that they do more with this production in the future. For the number 7 and the number 6 slot, we're going to talk about a couple of concerts that I've been to see this year from some performers that I really like. For number 7, we're going to talk about Jordan Luke Gage. And so I went to see his concert in October and was just sort of thoroughly impressed with the performance. It was a nice mixture of sort of songs that were completely unrelated to musicals, but also then sort of the ones that you expected him to sing from shows that he's been in, and also some songs from just shows that he enjoys. And the thing is with Jordan Luke Gage is that the first thing that I saw him in was Anne Juliet, which he was very good in, but I don't feel like it fully showed off like everything that he is able to do. And then this year seeing him in Bonnie and Clyde is when I really started to take notice and be like, oh, actually you're really good. So then seeing him be able to do like a couple of hours of his own show and really showcasing what he can do with his vocals and all these different styles that he can do was just a really good experience, and I had a great time, particularly with the end song where he did Raise a Little Hell from Bonnie and Clyde into Bat Out of Hell. I don't like Bat Out of Hell in a musical, but hearing his version of it, I was like, oh, so maybe if I saw it with the right cast I might actually like it, because that was spectacular. Speaking of spectacular, at number 6 we had the Jeremy Jordan concert that I went to go and see in August, which was at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane. So Jeremy Jordan, you've heard me talk about him before. I've seen him in concert 3 times at this point, plus then seeing him in the concert version of Bonnie and Clyde earlier on in the year as well. I love him as a performer. I will never not get tickets to see him if he's doing a concert in the UK, unless he's doing a concert with his band, because that is not the sort of music I want to listen to. That is the only part of this concert that I didn't love so much, is that when he did the part with his band, he sounded great, it just wasn't the sort of music that I wanted to hear, but the rest of it was fantastic. He did a lot of medleys. He always does a lot of medleys in his set because his musical director Ben Rauhala puts a lot of them together. They did medleys of shows that have been on at that theatre before. They did one that was all songs from shows that are on in the West End at the minute. He sang songs from Moulin Rouge and Heathers. It was amazing. I loved that medley in particular. He also brought on Andy Mientus, who was in Smash with him, and sang a song from Rent, which, I mean, Meg can give you more information on my reaction to when they started singing that song. It was just a really good concert. Like I said, I will never not want to see Jeremy Jordan when he does his solo concerts. So we're now into our top 5, and this is when it became really hard for me to kind of put them in an order. Number 5 I'm pretty set on. It's a top 4 that starts to change around a little bit. For number 5 I'm going with Legally Blonde the musical, the Regent's Park open air theatre production. Now I've seen Legally Blonde before, I've seen it twice, and I've always enjoyed the show, but there was something about this production and just everything about how it was put together that just really made it click into place for me. So it was a more modernised production. It was set in modern day. Like, it started at the very beginning with some of the characters with a ring light, clearly filming a TikTok to show Elle to talk about her getting engaged. And when I'd seen clips of that before, I was a bit unsure of whether it would actually work or whether it would feel like they were just sort of shoehorning it in. But some of the changes that they made, and particularly with some of the casting choices they made, it just added like a whole new perspective on these characters and the sort of struggles that they would be going through as part of this elite university. And the thing is that it wasn't even necessarily like major changes. They didn't change like a lot of the lines or anything to really add it in, but just some of like the nuances and the performances were a lot different. It felt like the performances understood the story a lot more than some of the previous times I'd seen it, if that makes any sense at all. I really like this production, and I really hope it has a life outside of the Regent's Park Open Air Theatre. I'm not sure how likely that is because all of the actors have now moved on to other things, but I can live in hope that one day we will see this production again. Okay, so for number 4, I've ended up picking Cabaret. Now, I went to see this in November. I went to see it for my birthday, and this is another show that I've seen before, but the last time I saw this show, I really did not like the production. Like, I had no interest in going to see Cabaret again until they did this new version of it, and I just kept hearing things about sort of like what they'd done to the theatre with it. They'd made it like a whole experience, and I was just like, this sounds really intriguing. And the more and more I heard about it, the more I was like, I'm gonna have to go and see this, aren't I? And I missed out on the cast that I originally wanted to go and see. I would have liked to have seen Eddie Redmayne and Jessie Buckley when they were in it. I missed out on them, sadly, but every other cast since, to be honest, I've still been very much interested in. So we decided to get tickets for my birthday. By this point, we had a whole new cast again. We had Callum Scott Howells and Madeline Brewer, who were both people that I've seen in TV shows before. I was very intrigued to see how they would do the performances as well. And as I've sort of referenced here, intrigued was a main feeling that I had before I went in. I don't think I was ready for like quite how good this performance was actually going to be. I loved the film of Cabaret, and I really hoped it would capture more of that rather than the version I saw before. Just felt like it glossed over a lot of things. It didn't feel like it took the story seriously enough, because really Cabaret is actually quite a dark story. It's all set like on the cusp of World War II, and there's a lot of commentary that goes on throughout it, and it just felt like the version I'd seen before, just sort of the songs that are supposed to almost have two meanings, they only went for the comedic version of them, and they didn't really underpin the seriousness of them, whereas this one felt a lot heavier, a lot darker in the way that it needed to be. It was still very funny, it was still very over the top, but when it needed to get sinister, it was sinister. And I think sort of the whole atmosphere of how it's set up, so when you go in, it's actually in the round they've completely converted the theatre. You go in through the stage door and you sort of walk through all of the theatre, and there's like a performance that happens before the show even starts. It's an immersive experience. Immersive is very much a buzzword in the theatre at the minute, but I would say here it does apply, because from the very second that you walk in, you are in the Kit Kat Club. And I feel like that whole setting of it feeling like you are at the bar added to everything. And it was just a very good show, and I really want to go and see it again. And like I said, I put it at number 4, but just talking about it now, I'm like, should it be higher? But probably no, because actually let's move on to the next 3, because the next 3 are also very good shows, just very different types of shows. So my number 3 show that I've seen of the year is actually kind of 2 shows in one. It's one show, but it's just that I've seen 2 different versions of it technically this year. So that show is Bonnie and Clyde. I saw the stage concert version of it in January with Jeremy Jordan and Frances Mailey McCann, and then I saw the full production of the musical when it was at the Arts Theatre twice actually, and that was when it had Jordan Luke Gage and Frances Mailey McCann in it. I loved both of these productions, and they were both obviously like the same production. It's just that one was able to elaborate a bit more and had like a proper set, although actually the staged concert had a lot more going on than most stage concerts do. Like Jeremy Jordan has done interviews and things since and said like, when I heard it was a concert, I thought like when they stood there with some microphones and things, it's like, your version of concert is very different to my version of concert. And bless him, he had like very few days to rehearse for that, and it was impressive what he was able to do, considering that I think he rehearsed for like 2 days. But anyway, all of the times I saw the show this year was so good. When I originally booked tickets for this show, I booked it because I wanted to see Jeremy Jordan act in something rather than seeing him just do his own sort of solo concerts. And I'd heard of Bonnie and Clyde because I'd heard of it through him. I'd listened to some of the songs. I knew Raise a Little Hell because I'd seen him sing it before at a concert, but I'd not like fully listened to the cast recording. I think I listened to it like in the couple of weeks before I went to see the concert, but I only listened to it like once or twice, and I was like, okay, like I've got the gist of it now, it's fine. And then when I went to see it on stage, I was like, oh, okay, no, this is going to become a new obsession. And lo and behold, I've listened to it on repeat all year. Like, it's as soon as it got announced for its run at the Arts Theatre, I booked tickets for it immediately. We ended up going to see it again like the night before it closed, and then it does have another West End run happening next year, and I already have 3 tickets booked for it, and I'm planning on booking more because it's just stuck in my head so much. And I'm very happy that Jordan Luke Gage and Frances Maylor McCann are going to be doing that run next year, but I also think it's a show that I would happily go and see with other people in it as long as they are right for the role, because I think the show itself is just so good. The cast recording is one that I can just play on repeat constantly. So we're at number 2. Right, my number 1 and my number 2, I can't decide. I put them in this order for now because it feels like it would be wrong to put them in the other order. But also I've had more time to sit with one of them, and also there's just more involved with one of them, and I feel like that's why it has to be number 1. I feel like if you paid attention to other videos, or if you just know me in general, you'll know what 2 musicals I'm like debating between now. I mean, Meg went to see both of them with me, so she probably knows which 2 musicals I'm debating between right now. But yeah, one of them just feels like it has to be number 1 just purely because of how much I've talked about it this year. I think you can all guess what that one's going to be. So let's start with number 2, shall we? Number 2 is Newsies. So Newsies I went to go and see at the beginning of December. Newsies is a show that I have loved for many, many years. Watched the pro shot more times than I can even think about at this point. I love this show so much. And for a while it really felt like we were never going to get a production in the UK. For a while actually there was a rumour that they couldn't do a production in the UK because apparently they tried to do one and we didn't have the dance talent over here. I think the cast that I saw in early December definitely proved them wrong, because oh my god, the talent of that cast. Like, I do not understand how anyone can do that much dancing and then like land a jump the way that they do and then go straight into singing after, because that's what they were doing. They were like, vocals never faltered. Like, the harmonies in that show, like the majority of Newsies is actually big ensemble numbers. There are sort of standout individual songs as well, but the majority of it is ensemble numbers, and within these numbers the ensemble has to do a lot of dancing and a lot of singing, and none of it ever seems to falter, and I just don't know how. And I saw it in previews as well. It had been on for less than a week when I saw it, and I feel like it's probably got even better since, and I'm going to see it again in January and I can't wait. And this is why I said that like these 2 are interchangeable in a way, because like I said, I still have more times to see Newsies, and I feel like it's one of those where the more times I see it the more I'm gonna love it. But it was so good, and I was really, really worried that they would change things from the production, from the American production, because like I said, I've seen that pro shot so many times, and they changed some things. Like, they had to change some things, but it was more like adding things to it, and they did some like really cool stuff with the staging that was like unique to the theatre that it's in, and I loved every bit of that they added in. But also like all the stuff like at the heart of it was very much the same, and like although the dancing, like although the choreography was different, it was still like the same sort of energy and the same vibe to it, and I just left the show like with all the emotions that I wanted to leave the show with. It was so good. So my number 1 show of the year, you've heard me talk about this show many, many times. And the thing is like objectively Newsies is probably a better show, but emotionally, like it has to be Moulin Rouge, right? Like, you've heard me talk about it so many times. So let me again tell you my story of Moulin Rouge. Moulin Rouge is my favourite film of all time. I can watch this film on repeat. I can quote the entire thing to you. I don't know why I love it so much, I just do. I was supposed to go and see the show on Broadway for my 30th birthday back in 2020. That got cancelled because of the pandemic. I was at the time hopefully going to go and see the original Broadway cast. At the time we booked the holiday, none of them had been announced to leave yet, so we were hoping that at least some of them would still be in it when we went to go and see it. That obviously didn't happen. The UK production obviously kept getting pushed back. I finally went to go and see it in January this year. I really, really enjoyed the show, like the actual spectacle of the whole thing when I went to see it. but sadly did not love the cast that I saw. Actually, sorry, let's put this properly. I love some of the cast that I saw. I always point out that I really love Clive Carter as Harold Zidler, and I really love Jason Pennycook as Toulouse-Lautrec, amongst others, but those were sort of the two standouts. Sadly, the two that didn't stand out to me, the two that I didn't love, were the Christian and Satine at the time, which is the two main characters. Now, there's nothing against these actors that were playing these roles. The guy who played Christian, I just felt like he wasn't quite ready for the role yet. He's quite young, he's fresh out of drama school. It just felt like it was a role that was quite a lot to give somebody who was so young. And the Satine wasn't bad, but I think it was just like the combination of the two. The chemistry didn't quite work between them. Overall, I was just a little bit underwhelmed by those two main performances, which is the love story that underpins the entire story. This is not sounding like my number one show of the year, is it? Okay, let's talk about cast change, shall we? So in October we had a cast change. Most of the main actors were changed actually, but the main one that really sort of changed my perspective on the show was the change to Christian. So playing Christian in the West End, we now have an actor called Jamie Moscato, who's probably most known for being the original JD in the West End cast of Heathers. He's also been in other things. Personally, I saw him in Les Mis when he was playing Enjolras in the stage concert version that came back after COVID, like the socially distanced version that they put on. And I've loved him in everything that I've seen him in, particularly as JD in Heathers. I saw him in it twice, and his performance is one of the reasons that I love that show so much. So when he got announced to be in Moulin Rouge, I was just very much like, this could change this show. Like, this could make this show, like, what I want it to be. Because also what I've not mentioned actually is that in between sort of seeing the show the first time and then this cast change getting announced, I sort of developed more and more of an obsession with the show just from listening to the cast recording, and was very much thinking like, there's so many possibilities with this show if only the casting was better. Because the more I listened to the cast recording, the more I was like, yes, the show is actually something I really, really like. I just didn't like the cast. Also, it probably helped that in the middle of this time, the 43-second clip of Aaron Tveit singing El Tango de Roxanne with the opt up at the end got released, and I listened to that on repeat as well. So, like I said, when Jamie Moscato got announced, it was like, oh, it could be like, this could be the thing that really changes my opinion on this. And lo and behold, it really, really was. I went to go and see it in November. Me and Meg went to see it when it was both of our birthdays, and it was just so, so good. If that would have been the first time I saw Moulin Rouge, I wouldn't have had any doubts about that show at all, because his performance was so good. And also, like, all the other new cast that came in were amazing as well. But in particular, Jamie Moscato as Christian was just fantastic. And I'm sure you're all sick of hearing me talk about this. I do really, really want to get tickets to go and see him again. But also in the meantime, it's been announced that Aaron Tveit's going back into Moulin Rouge on Broadway. And I am going to New York next year and going to go and see Aaron Tveit in Moulin Rouge on Broadway. So maybe I'll see that first and then get tickets to see Jamie Moscato again. But either way, the Moulin Rouge obsession has been ridiculous this year. I'm very sorry if you're all sick of hearing me talk about it. I will try and find a new obsession next year, but I can't guarantee it. We'll see what next year's top 10 list brings, shall we? But I think that's pretty much everything. Is anyone surprised by what my number one show was of the year? I don't think any of you are. But thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. If you've been to the theatre this year, please tell me what your favourite show is that you've seen. And I will see you guys tomorrow with a new video. Bye.